social change motivation, and Cyrus, Romania, and Israel, and looking at what that tells us about workplace reform. And this is Anna Priya's study, and looked at these researchers looked at this is kind of an element. This looks at various facets of intergroup contact theory, and this looks specifically at the effect of intergroup contact and social identification on social change among three advantaged groups, which are Cyprus, Romania, and Israel, within Cyprus, Romania, and Israel. And so there's a lot of research that shows that disadvantaged individuals engage in social change efforts to address structural inequalities, but not a lot is known about the psychological conditions that promote or hinder the support for social change benefiting the disadvantaged members among the advantaged groups. So this study kind of looks deeper into that, and the researchers hypothesize, one, that more contact with the disadvantaged outgroup will be associated with more endorsement of its social change motivations via intergroup trust, perspective taking, and decreased intergroup anxiety. Second, that stronger in-group identification will be associated with less endorsement of the disadvantaged outgroup's social change motivations via decreased intergroup trust and perspective taking and increased intergroup anxiety. Next is that more contact with the disadvantaged outgroup will be associated with less support for collective action in favor of the advantaged in-group via increased intergroup trust, perspective taking, and decreased intergroup anxiety. And then fourth, stronger in-group identification will be associated with more support for collective action in favor of the advantaged group via decreased intergroup trust, perspective taking, and increased intergroup anxiety. And the methods here they recruited 336 adult participants who were Turkish Cypriots, and they were invited to participate in a survey on current political issues in Northern Cyprus. The researchers measured all variables by this multi-item 7-point Likert scale types and used a structural equation modeling approach to test their model. And then they measured intergroup contact, in-group identification as Turkish Cypriot, and intergroup trust. To measure intergroup contact, they asked questions like, how often do you interact with your Turkish friends? How often do you participate in special days such as birthdays, funerals, and other special days? And then of your Turkish friends and their family. For in-group identification, they looked at being a Turkish Cypriot is an important part of my identity. I'm very happy to be a Turkish Cypriot, and I'm very proud to be a Turkish Cypriot. And intergroup trust looked at, or they asked, most members of the Turkish immigrant community in Cyprus can be trusted, or despite everything, I trust Turkish immigrants, and so on. And the results of this were that all three studies, intergroup contact led the advantaged groups to support social change motivations of the disadvantaged groups through increased trust, perspective taking, and reduced anxiety. And then additionally, in-group identification weakened their intention to support social change motivations via perspective taking, intergroup anxiety within study 2. And then within study 3 through intergroup trust, perspective taking, and intergroup anxiety. And the results, or the key takeaway that Anna Priya brought from this is that with an intergroup contact between staff members in larger companies, it's sometimes hard for teams to be able to communicate with each other routinely. But intergroup contact shows this positive correlation between communication and advocacy for reform to some degree. And so the organization's management should be committed to improving this communication between teams and individuals. And then this can happen through things like events, collaborative meetings, team building activities, or even trainings. So that's a pretty brief rundown of this. It generally, I would say, it makes sense to me that so this lines up with some of the other intergroup contact literature that we've seen, but interesting to see it in the context of social change.
Yeah, I think one advantage organizations have is that they have like a leadership team that can implement, that can sort of implement social change initiatives between different departments. Whereas in the international context, you're dealing with two different governments and they kind of, they're at odds, and there's no higher authority that says, hey, you guys have to get together and have some sort of, positive contact. But so I think at companies, it's up to the leadership team to kind of recognize, hey, there's an issue between these departments or between these groups, and how do we start taking measures to help them have more positive contact and reduce anxiety between them.
Yeah, and I think this also highlights how intergroup contact between different departments in a large organization can lead to basically growing the success of the company, right? If it that's kind of like how I'm viewing the social change part within a company. So it's like, okay, so if you have more intergroup contact between all these different departments, sharing of different ideas, sharing of knowledge, understanding what the other department is, their challenges are, and what they're working on, can lead to larger, innovation and success
for sure.
within the company.
Yeah, I've seen over and over that a lot of companies, especially startups, like newer companies, especially companies with new CEOs or new leaders, where they don't see the value right off the bat of everyone knowing what each other is working on, and there's no sort of there's no like all team meetings sometimes, or there's no central project management system where it's like, the training wing over here doesn't know what the marketing is working on, and marketing doesn't know what the advocacy is working on, and advocacy doesn't, it's like everybody's kind of siloed and no one knows what each other's working on, and they're doubling efforts in some sense. Like marketing could be using the things that they've got, the training already developed or something like that, so there's definitely a lot of efficiency and innovation that can come from contact between all these different groups.
Mm-hmm.